express your opinion about something, we both been taken as being aggressive, confrontational, what's some more famous words? Yelling, frustrated, anger, some more stuff. All of the above when you're just trying to express yourself. So technically, I've been to protect myself, me and my family.
So just so you know, ma'am, it's okay. Let's say if you're in some kind of a meeting or issue you think's going on, hi Jim, get confrontational.
Had to call you out, Jim.
Come on in. It's okay to tape record that. In my opinion, it's better to say, hey, you know, we're here talking about this issue. I got my phone out, I am tape recording it. By law, you don't have to do that as long as there's a conversation going on and one person in the room knows that there's a tape recording going on. It's a good idea, in my opinion, to do that because I think it sets the level of accountability for everybody. It's not okay and it's not legal if there's a bunch of people in a room talking, or even two people, and nobody knows there's a tape recorder going on. For example, if Dave was taping this, and apparently he might be, we should know that. But if that was covert and we didn't know that, and there's microphones in the walls and things like that, that's not okay, and that's called eavesdropping. But if one person in the room knows that the conversation is being tape recorded, even on the phone or not, that's okay. But you should tell people that you're doing that. And I think it kind of levels the playing field, and especially if you have someone you have a history with that the truth gets stretched or whatever you want to say, put that tape recorder in the middle of the table and you say, hey, just to let you know I am tape recording this.
Is there a breakdown of quadrants of the city where more of the complaints come from? Like, could you signify or?
Complaints against officers?
Yes. Like, is it the southeast, is it the northeast?
Sure. I'll speak about the police department, and Bill could talk about the county. The city's broken down as far as the police department in 4 areas, kind of northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. The busiest part of the city is southwest, right where we're at here. It's a Gold Hill station. Yep, and I think that's driven a lot by downtown issues and calls for service. Followed pretty closely by the southeast part of town, Sand Creek Station. And I would honestly tell you that that's driven more by persons crimes or more violent crimes. The southeast part of town, that's the Sand Creek Station. The northeast part of town is Stetson Hills, that station up there by Sky Sox off the Tut. That's busy, but our officers spend a lot of time driving the calls for service. In and of itself, that'd be like the 4th or 5th largest city in the state just by itself. Stetson Hills, a lot of driving time. And again, the Falcon Division is probably the smallest division by staffing and complaints. So again, if you're talking about complaints against police officers, I don't know if I can give you an exact breakdown. I think it's even, and I think it's based more on numbers, how many contacts we have with people. I think more specifically, if you want to kind of get to the point of things, is what I follow very closely is bias-based policing complaints against police officers. And there's some interesting numbers there. And I'm not sure if everyone in the room knows it or not, but probably 8 or 9 years ago, the state of Colorado passed a law that said, as a police officer, if I stop somebody for whatever traffic violation and I don't write them a ticket, by law I have to give you a business card and say, hey, I'm Officer Pete Carey. If you need to get a hold of me later on, so that later on you can't say I didn't know if that was Bill or Pete or SO or city or something like that. And we track our bias-based policing complaints. And again, CSPD over the course of a year, we answer about 315,000 calls for service. Throw in another probably 200,000 to 400,000 contacts with people, officer-initiated things that aren't dispatched in. So it's well over 500,000 times a year. Over the course of a year, we probably get maybe 7 or 8 or 9 bias-based policing complaints. I can tell you in the last 5 years, we've sustained 2 of those complaints. And that's for officers that forgot to give out their business card when they didn't write a ticket. So, and those numbers are all available, and I can get those for you. But it depends on the volume of calls for service. And I can tell you that Sand Creek Southeast and Gold Hill Southwest are really, really busy. So there's more generated contacts, more generated arrests, and things like that in those areas.
if the complaints are higher in one area or another, will you proportionally put cameras on those officers or more officers there in those areas?
All of our officers.
All of them will have
All of
cameras.
them?
Yeah, all of them are gonna have
All of
cameras.
them.
Okay.
And ours follow the same thing. The area off of B Street that matches up with the southwest part of Colorado Springs, that is typically our highest. The next would be security, which matches to the southeast part of Colorado Springs. And then the other would follow with Cimarron Hills, the older part of Cimarron Hills off of Peterson and Peterson Road and Highway 24, basically. Those are that generate the most. In the last year and a half, we've had one sustained bias-based policing complaint based off of a very
Now,
similar.
you keep saying sustained, who's it sustained by? That's my question.
it's-
Like,
well, our internal
who's
affairs-
investigating it?
our-
Because as police, that really doesn't tell us much.
Well, it's interesting you
Just to
say that.
It should be a
It is our internal affairs
neighborhood
units.
or a
Right.
city council or somebody like that.
Right, so that, and that leads into the area of, should the sheriff's office, should the police department have some citizen oversight review, or some citizen disciplinary review board? And that's a tough one, and I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily believe that brings more oversight to the situation. And again, I've had these conversations with my boss, Mayor Southers. We had a pretty interesting conversation in the library about a week ago about people that are advocating for that. My concern, and I'll just be frank with you, is political agendas when you assemble a citizens review board. So objectivity concerns me a little bit. And honestly, I think it takes months and months and months to understand our policies and procedures that a police officer undergoes as far as use of force and things like that. Even the Supreme Court recognizes when you judge an officer's use of force, it should be judged by, as far as reasonableness, by another police officer that's had that training. So taking someone from the community that doesn't have a law enforcement background and saying, hey, what do you think? Should he have handcuffed him on that situation? No, I don't think that was necessary. He seemed like he was complying. We have policies that say on felony you get handcuffed, things like that. It takes a long time to get that right and figure that out. So I've had these conversations with Mayor Southers, and being a former Attorney General, he also believes it doesn't bring any more accountability to it. I will say that by state law, that changed about a year ago when it comes to officer-involved shootings, we don't look at our own anymore without insight and actually operational oversight of the investigation by another police department, in this case the Sheriff's Office. We actually have a deadly force investigation team in which when my officers are involved in a shooting, and that happens probably about 5 times a year. We're not lead investigators on it anymore. It's done through the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. When their officers involved in a deadly force incident, we look at theirs. Is that perfect? No, because I know these guys and all that, but I think it's as close to objective as possible, without saying, hey, we just got involved in the use of force and unfortunately shot and killed somebody. Can I get 6 people to do the investigation? It's tough.
Yeah, and then they're always reviewed by the district attorney afterwards. Before it's found, before one of the, there's a decision made on whether or not the shoot was justified or not, that's always reviewed by the district attorney's office as that third party.
Yeah.
First, I'd like to say thank you both for the service that you've given to our city and our county, because we do have a very safe city and county, so thank you for that. That's really fun. My question goes back to the cameras in the schools. Now, I'm assuming you don't have the cameras on because most of those kids are under 18, but what if there's a school such as one in the District 20 that's had 9 suicides over the year? Would there be a time you'd say, maybe we do need to see what's going on in that school and in the highways or hallways, or is it just gonna be completely, they're under 18 and we're not gonna go there?
Well, it's not always just the under 18 piece, it's just they are constantly in contact. The camera, if it were on all day long, it wouldn't last that long.
Correct.
That's the first thing. And then the second thing is how do we store that, and how do we go through that process? And then we have to go back, and if there's an issue, we have to redact all of those photos. We have to make those people unrecognizable, and that's a chore in itself. It's one of the reasons we selected this camera vendor, because it makes it a little bit easier that way. But there are times, and like Pete said, that those cameras are going to need to be on, and we need to try and be as diligent about operating them during the
Morning, Angela, good to see you. So I kind of went into this camera thing with our school districts, the 5 of those in the city, thinking these superintendents are going to just think this is the greatest thing in the world and all that. Man, I went into this meeting, it was like sticking your hand in a meat shredder. I had no idea how many questions they had and what concerns they had, just like what you said. But that does play into it. The age of these kids. I think the rapport that our school resource officers in the county and the city develop with these kids is huge, and I think cameras would inhibit that. But what I found out in virtually every school district in this area is, I was shocked to find out how many dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of cameras they already have on in the schools. You guys know that?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're talking about is adding the interaction camera between the cop and the kid. Man, there's not a hallway, there are so many cameras going on in the schools, they already have that. So as it relates to the tragedy of these suicides that we're dealing with, and again, we formed an advisory committee with these kids. Our first meeting of the school year is tomorrow night, and that's what the kids talk about more than anything else, is teen suicide and all that. I'm not sure that would have a big impact on that, because it's about that interaction between the kids and the SRO. And if they're talking about somebody that they think is going to hurt themselves or even themselves, and they're kind of bearing their soul to the police officer, I'm not sure you're saying, hang on, really? That's not going to work like that. But there are just tons, hundreds of cameras in these schools that they're already watching and all that.
One of the things that we, in one of our first meetings last year with these students, we had this conversation, and we had a big PowerPoint we were going to present on body-worn cameras. And these kids really asked some very difficult.
They lumped us up.
Yeah, very difficult
They went all
questions.
Bill of Rights, Constitution.
Yeah.
I didn't even think they could spell those words. They lumped us up.
They asked some really, really tough questions. They presented some tough issues for us, and made us think about things that we probably would not have thought of otherwise. They're very concerned about their constitutional rights, about being filmed while they're at school in their safe environment, what they feel is a safe environment at school. And I don't know, it's going to be an interesting prospect.
And to be honest with you too, Angela, one size doesn't fit all. I mean, one of the 5 school districts can say, you know what, camera's not in my school. And again, I'll be honest with you, without naming the school district, that was what was posed to me. And I said, that sounds like that's going to end our SRO program in the school. And we're going to pull our officer out, and guess what? The officer that responds to the fight, before he gets out of the car, is going to go, click. Mm-hmm. You're going to have cameras anyway. But I get it about not having, as our officers walk up and down the hallways and talks to the kids, having cameras on all the time. I get that, that makes sense to me. But if, our policy says, if you think there's going to be some kind of an interaction or arrest situation, you turn it on, you start filming.
That's what I wanted to make sure, because I sort of had the impression, and maybe I came a little bit late, was that it was just a no-go for the
No.
SROs. And I want to make sure that they do
If
have that.
it's likely we're going to have an altercation or interaction, if, we have a school resource officer walking down the hallway and a teacher or a kid comes and says, hey, there's a fight in the cafeteria. He's going to turn around and head to the fight, he's going to turn the camera on and activate it, if he's got any kind of probability of breaking these kids up and things like that.
Thank you for that clarification.
And there's some automatic settings that are going to be on these cameras that if the officer is running hot lights and siren, it'll automatically turn on. If they are laid down, for instance, they'll automatically turn on. I think if they're running,
If they're running, you stop at a Dunkin' Donuts, it turns. I know you guys are thinking it. If in a CSP, I think you guys can have the same capability. If they activate the overhead lights and turn on the car door, the camera automatically activates. All those kind of high-stress situations where a cop might forget to do that. If they're laying horizontally on the ground.
right.
If 2 or 3 cops get together within a few meters of each other, it turns on. It could be linked to the computer-aided dispatch where if it shows the address of, this is 408, 309 South Cascade, I get within a block of that and my police car activates because you're going to that call for service. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I wanted to follow up on a question with you, Chief Perry.
Sure you don't want
Yeah, this is following up on a question from the Peace and Justice Commission's panel 2 weeks ago. And I so appreciate you participating in dialogues like this one. I guess firstly, I'm curious if you've had time in the past 2 weeks to read the DU law report that we talked about at that panel, which focuses on the Colorado Springs enforcement specifically and is entitled A Price Too High, the Cost of Criminalizing Homelessness.
I have not yet, I've got it on the list to read, I have not.
Okay.
Talked about- Did you all hear that?
No.
No. So I'm asking a question about a DU law report.
What is that?
Entitled DU Law, like the Denver University Law, wrote a report, a Colorado Springs spotlight on the price of criminalizing homelessness. And I guess why I bring this up, it's also kind of relevant to your questions about staffing. What this report points out, and which I hope you'll have time to read at some point,
I do have it on the list.
it focuses on your department specifically. But it points out a trend in an increase in enforcement of policies which are considered essential to sustaining life, such as sleeping, enforced through the camping ban, and also park hour ordinances. And just specifically focusing on life-sustaining behaviors and nonviolent misdemeanors, and showing an increase in enforcement despite a stabilization, at least from 2014 to 2015, of our homeless population. So that shows an increase in enforcement despite kind of a level population, although I know in this past year there's been an increase in that population. And I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are on the increased policing of nonviolent misdemeanors, life-sustaining behaviors such as just simply sleeping in a park. Having that happen at the same time as having 911 call response times
Yep.
get longer and longer, and I understand you have, what, like 30% fewer officers than a city of this size should have, but how do you hold those two
So,
facts in your head, I guess?
It's a great question. So the struggle I have in this community as we deal with homeless issues is balancing accountability for criminal behavior with a humanity part of it. I'm very proud of what we're trying to do with our homeless outreach team and trying to find resources for our homeless people. And it's a struggle. I mean, I don't get, as a police officer, I don't get to say, you know what, I'm not real thrilled about the sit and lie ordinance. So I'm not real thrilled about trespassing private property. I'm not going to go to that. And I can't write a bulletin or a directive to my cops when we get calls for service in and around the downtown area or in some of your neighborhoods regarding illegal camping. We're not going to go because I don't think that's fair to do. I try to, and again, the quality of enforcement is a big deal. In the county and the city, we try to treat everybody the same. But as we get calls for service in certain areas, and downtown, the west side has got probably more than any other part of the city. But there are homeless issues all over the city. We try to be fair about it, and we try to balance the humanitarian part of it. Again, the last resort is arresting somebody, especially someone who doesn't have a home. But when we get those calls, I don't expect my officers are going to go, you know what, is this a homeless person or not? Should I treat it any differently? I've got to go with the criminal behavior. In a lot of cases, it's urination calls, it's defecation calls, it's trespass on property, it's thefts, it's assaults and fights and drinking in public and things like that. And I got to deal with that criminal behavior. And again, I hope that my officers are not treating these calls differently based on whether or not they think that person by their appearance is homeless. I can't do that. But I've got to get it figured out. Again, our homeless outreach team is very, very tied in with Springs Rescue Mission, and my hope is, especially as it gets colder, we got a place where we can tell people to go that's safer than sleeping in a park or something like that. And again, the other part of the accountability is I get probably hundreds of complaints a month about people that just want to go to the park and enjoy it with their kids, and they don't want to smell marijuana smoke, they don't want to sit next to someone on the same bench who's drinking alcohol and things like that. Criminal conduct that my officers get stuck in the middle and they don't get to say, you know what, I'm not a big fan of the new Pedestrian Access Act, I'm not going to enforce it. We don't get to do that. If someone insists on signing that complaint, I look forward to reading that report and kind of getting that balance. Denver's dealing with a lot of situations like that downtown 16th Street Mall, and trying to figure that out. But it's a struggle balancing that accountability of not forming criminal conduct with a kind of a humanizing way to do that. And we're struggling because of the resources in the city.
And at what point do you say the guy that sets up his camp in the middle of your sidewalk, or in the parking lot at Target, or the guy that parks his car in front of someone's house and just decides he's gonna sleep in the back seat and stays day and day and day, and the neighbors call and complain, at what point do we say, well, this is just typical life-sustaining behavior, or is this a problem for the neighborhood? Is this a concern? We have to take a hard look at the criminal behavior, and how do we respond to some of that?
On a similar topic, what is the policy or whatever around panhandling on
Yes,
street corners and
please.
islands and so on? And are you familiar with what they're doing in Albuquerque that seems to be addressing it pretty reasonably while protecting their constitutional rights?
So in town here, based on some recent conversations and agreements and discussions with the ACLU, basically what my police officers do is address aggressive panhandling. And that can be defined in a couple of ways, but I think it's pretty obvious just the way that it's titled. If someone's in your face or multiple asks or something like that, that's aggressive panhandling, that's against the law. Short of that, there's a lot of behavior that we used to address through some panhandling ordinances that, with an agreement with the ACLU, we're no longer enforcing. Great example is along roads, medians and things like that. We're not doing that anymore. And I'm not specifically sure what you're talking about in Albuquerque.
In Albuquerque, the mayor got fed up with the plethora of panhandlers, and he found $50,000 in his budget, had one worker and a van that was painted "There is another way," and they drove around and offered panhandlers, hungry homeless, whatever, jobs, doing things like Keep Colorado Springs Beautiful
Yeah.
does here.
Yeah.
And they work them, pay them, give them a lunch, give them a place to stay that night, and they've also posted signs around the prime panhandling areas. As a result, the average Albuquerque citizen is well aware that there is another way for these panhandlers, and their take has gone down, so the numbers have gone down.
Got it.
Our continuum of care, while they don't actually seem avoidant of the idea, is very uninterested in pursuing it.
The interesting thing is I've noticed popping up in prime panhandling locations, a group of signs that say specifically that, jobs, $50 a day,
Yeah.
job signs, and they are all over the place in the area of Powers, Carefree, and the
Not downtown.
and the panhandlers have left. So maybe someone is doing that, but it's nothing
Yeah,
to the.
Jay or Nina, I don't know if Amy Cox, who oversees a lot of our programs, is aware
Amy
of
told
that.
me, oh yeah, we talked to Albuquerque, we're not interested in doing it until we can house the people.
Okay.
The old Homeward Pikes Peak would have said, wow, let's figure out what we could do, we'll deal with problems as they come along. I fear our homeless effort in this town has grown to the point where it's an established industry, and it's very slow moving.
Yeah, and there are some gaps in service for homeless folks, and again, like I mentioned, as it gets colder out, that's my big concern, that we're gonna have people out there sleeping and freezing and maybe even dying if they're not things like that. Springs Rescue Mission is working on that. I can tell you that, and I'll just be candid, from the perspective of CSPD, I've used the term lumped up before. We got lumped up pretty good by ACLU on some of our enforcement activities, and we're really, really careful about that. And short of aggressive panhandling, we're not enforcing that. And again, there's a direct impact, especially in our downtown area. But that's the reality we're dealing with right now.
There is the perception that this is a great town to be on the streets of.
Okay, I can tell you our homeless outreach team does talk to a lot of people who come into this area from other areas. And a driving factor on a lot of that is the marijuana industry. And again, in the last year or so, what my homeless outreach team officers have learned is that there's kind of a younger, more aggressive, mostly male contingent that have come into the city. For a while there, I don't know if this is funny or not, for a while there, A lot of them were saying, well, we got kicked out of Denver by the Denver cops. So I called the Denver chief and asked him, have you ever heard of Pueblo, you know? What the heck?
And they talked about the reduction of chronic homelessness in Denver was roughly 70% in 2014 and 2015. Well, it's easy. Chronic homelessness are the people that live that way without any other means of support. They are that way because they are economically destitute or otherwise. But it's the other homelessness that we deal with all the time, the mental health issues. You want to move chronic homelessness out of your city, put them on a bus and move them to Albuquerque. They quit being a problem here. They won't come back. It's the people that come here for a reason. They come here because of the marijuana issues in a lot of cases. That's why we're seeing them migrate to the west side, where they're closer to the recreational marijuana stores in Manitou, and it is a problem, and it's a draw. And
But hasn't the west side homeless population always been higher than everywhere else, before marijuana even came into play?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
that's generally true, but it's definitely getting a little bit more concentrated around some more marijuana dispensaries and outlets.
yep, and downtown.
Now,
But-
in your interactions with the homeless, are they saying they're using marijuana because, oh, we came to Colorado just to use marijuana? Because my findings is, when I'm talking to a homeless person, they're saying they're coming to Colorado to get off another drug by using marijuana, to get off heroin, to get off pills. That's what I hear.
That's a new strategy to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that working?
It's not, obviously.
I know,
That was
seriously.
rhetorical. Ma'am?
If you can afford marijuana, go find yourself a place to live and don't smoke.
You can say the same thing about
Duly
liquor,
noted.
right?
Anyone know how much an ounce of weed costs?
It costs $200.
$300.
It's gotta be.
Burger King.
Or even cigarettes. I saw
How much?
somebody-
It's $120
For an ounce?
for an ounce of marijuana. That's
And,
about the going rate.
At on the street, are you talking about the black market, or are you talking about a dispensary?
At like a medical dispensary, at a recreational shop, I believe they're $400.
300.
It's 300, okay.
Barry, and then you, ma'am?
Chief, can you talk a little bit about the decisions that you've recently announced regarding patrol officers and long-term? What needs to happen to change the staffing issue that you're facing right now?
Thank you for that question.
Teed it right up.
Thank you. I made a couple decisions recently that got quite a bit of media attention regarding kind of a state of affairs of what's going on at the police department. And to kind of boil that down, we're having some issues in our staffing and being able to hire and train and retain officers. And it's to the point where we can't hire them fast enough. And over the last year or so, year and a half, we've actually hired 135 police officers. Unfortunately, we have officers leaving for a lot of different reasons a little bit quicker. I think some national events have fueled that, Barry. I think that some local events, Planned Parenthood, the Halloween shooting about a year ago, have affected some decisions of people whether or not they want to be police officers any further. And I think staffing, quite honestly, is related to how much money, if you're going to do a job that's a tough job, how much you're getting paid to do that relative to other police departments. Now, there's only one other police department in the room here, or law enforcement agency, and unfortunately, they're paying a lot more money to start than CSPD. And I think we top out in about 4 or 5 years a little bit more, but it's all those things coming together. And last year, for example, CSPD had 54 officers leave. Some for good reasons, old guys like me that just did their time and they're going on to something else. But there's a lot of them when we do exit interviews, and we ask them why they're leaving. My wife doesn't want me to be a police officer anymore. This is dangerous. I had an academy class, just for example, of 50 that started in January 2016. They're not even out of training yet, down to 36. 2 quit over the weekend, too stressed out about what they're reading and they're seeing all over the country, from the Tulsa to the Charlotte to the Dallas Police Department. They're leaving left and right. And by the way, by the time I get a full investment into an officer, 6-month academy, about 4 months of field training, I got about $65,000 invested in them. I started with 50, and I'm down to 36 already, and it's not even a year in yet. That's an expensive proposition, and it's not just me; it's all over the place. The turnover is just phenomenal. if I was a young man or a young woman and I just did a 4-year degree, and I went home and told my mom and dad, hey, thanks a lot, Mom and Dad, for giving me that college degree. I think I want to be a police officer. Think how that would fly. And if you add in there, if it's a person of color, an African-American man or woman, it's not a sought-after career right now. And that turnover and that attrition is killing me, and I just can't hire them fast enough.
What is the
Long-term,
starting salary of a law enforcement officer these days?
Could I let Barry follow up?
Yeah, sorry about that,
And we'll
sir.
come back.
Long-term, what needs to